Skill capped, I got it. I know everything there is to know about how to manage waves, track junglers, macro, etc. It's time you teach me the real secrets to climbing, how to outplay everyone, how to 1v9 and carry my crap teammates.
Buddy, what took you so long? If you really wanted to know the secret to climbing, you could have just asked me from the start. Alright, here it is. Let's talk about rebounding some minion waves, huh? Look, I know every little kid out there wants to grow up to be as good and clean as my Yasuo, but unfortunately it's not something I can teach you. This level of talent is usually something you're born with. And I know talking about minion waves isn't the hottest topic to getting better, but it's literally what matters the most for improving. And what we're about to learn today is probably the most important macro concept in the game. That being said, I know that watching us at skill cap prove these things against lower elo can sometimes be unsatisfying. We're so much better at everything else, surely it's not just the wave tactics that are winning us the game, right? Which is why in this video and the course I'm making on the site, which you can find here, my editor will show it, I'm going to talk about a ton of things to do with rebounds. I'll cover at least every single role to an extent, and every clip analyzed here and there will all be from my main account. I'll show you guys that there's almost zero difference between high and low elo besides mechanics. It's really all the same nonsense at the end of the day. And the super basic stuff we teach to help you climb in low elo honestly works in Challenger too. And just so you know, to access the course that I've spent a ton of time creating and believe will seriously help you climb, then you need to join us over at SkillCap. I highly recommend it, as that's where I post all of my best guides and courses, but the better reason is that the more of you that sign up with our special discount link below, then the more challenges we'll force Hector to do. What? What is this script? And better yet, there's no downside. If you don't climb while actively using skill cap, you can claim a refund, so why not give it a go? Anyway, back to the guide, and we can't get started unless we know what a rebound is, so let's start there and break that down if you don't know. It's pretty simple. When you crash a wave into a tower, there's two outcomes that can occur. The first is if the wave under the tower is cleared before the next wave gets there. This resets the lane to an effectively neutral state. The other, and way more common event that can happen, is when the incoming wave actually gets to the tower while an enemy wave is still there. This causes it to stall here like so. Then, eventually, the wave is cleared, and so the next waves kinda crash like this. Up next, the even minion rule takes over. Since the wave is closer to this side of the lane, reinforcing waves get here and buffer this one first. This results in a guaranteed slow push towards the other side. And that's it. That's a rebound. Super simple, right? And yet, it's probably the most important laning concept in the game. It is the foundation for so many decisions you'll make throughout the lane phase. And for the sake of simplicity, almost all of those choices can be categorized under two sections. The first is that when a rebound occurs, one side of the matchup is under a lot of pressure. One of the very first things you learn in this game is that minion waves are a massive part of early trading and all-in power. Whoever has a bigger wave will often have the advantage in fighting, making it very hard for their opponent to walk up and CS. As you all know though, that's not always the case. There's a ton of situations where having a bigger wave isn't always ideal. If you're low on health or in a bad matchup, then a rebounding wave can actually be awful for you. For example, here I'm playing Garen vs Rumble and you can see how my own wave is working against me. It's pretty hard to walk up every time the wave is pushing towards Rumble, and I'm having a pretty miserable time in this lane. Another way that rebounds are used for pressure is that after your opponent crashes a wave into your tower, you can turn that into a slow push back towards them and, maybe set up a dive with your jungler. There is also regular jungle interference during your own rebound that you should watch out for. As seen here, Jinx has a rebound going towards our side of the lane, which forces her to walk up, leaving her vulnerable. These are just some of the basic examples in which rebounds can lead to lane pressure for one side of the matchup. The second simple concept you need to keep in mind about rebounding waves is that one side of the matchup wants to leave lane and the other doesn't. For a simple visual why, I've set up a rebound here with a friend. Now the wave right now is coming towards me after I crashed it at the tower. Now let's say that both me and my opponent leave lane to fight over this control ward or something. I would technically be winning this encounter even if we go completely even in this trade. And that's because my own minions are dying faster than my opponents. Yeah, I'm losing some farm by being here as well, but I'm winning relative to how many my lane opponent is losing by being here. So it's not that you can't leave lane while the wave is rebounding away from you, you just kind of don't want to, like my opponent shouldn't have here. Maybe 10 seasons from now my jungler will finally understand that, though I'm not too hopeful on that. And that's it. Those are all the concepts you need to know about rebounds. It's that easy. The only hard part is applying it to these super specific situations you get into in solo queue. So, for the rest of this guide, I'll be covering some of those common scenarios I see and show you how to play things out to make the most out of every rebound. Now technically, what should happen in a lot of even matchups is what I like to refer to as a rebound spree. So, let's say one side gets a minion lead and starts crashing a wave at someone's tower. Then, that player uses the rebound created to then crash into their opponent's tower. Then the other player comes back, builds a rebound, and crashes again, and this process repeats again and again and again, and you get it. Cool. So, while that technically should happen, in between those rebounds, there is usually some way for you to punish your opponent. And you can do this with a dive, a freeze, a gank setup, etc. Let me show you a very good example of what I mean. Here I'm playing Samira with an Alistar. Now if you know anything about bot lane, you'll know that before level 3, Alistar is... hold on, let's see here. About as useless as the G in lasagna. That was somehow the best joke on this list, by the way. So, we want to play safe, right? Meaning that the second I get into lane, I drag the wave like so. The whole point of this is to make the wave push into us quicker due to the even minion rule. Kinda like a pseudo rebound. That way, we can avoid fighting the Yuumi and Jhin as much as possible while my Alistar is still useless. Anyway, the enemy team crashes the wave and it'll rebound back into them after I clear it. I will say that they use this time to roam. This is kind of what I talked about, your opponents can leave lane while the wave is rebounding towards them, so they use this time to kill my Corki, whatever, what can you do? Anyway, when they're back in lane, now we have the rebound in full effect. So, now that the matchup is about even, we can use this big minion wave to zone them, much like they were zoning us. And we just slowly build up a big crash off the rebound. Now this is exactly one of those moments I mentioned during a rebound spree, where you can punish and take advantage of the matchup. You see, Jhin and Yuumi's wave clear is pretty bad early on. What this means is that while the wave is crashing, Alistar and I can take a free recall and come back to lane before they've crashed the tower into us. So we get back to lane, and now the rebounding wave is going to work against them. Because it's pushing towards us, it forces them to have to play up in the lane, giving me and Alistar ample opportunities to engage. Since we have an item advantage, it doesn't really matter that we're at a minion deficit anymore. We can fight again and again, and eventually we're going to get a killing blow. As you can see, with really basic rebound knowledge, it makes even my Samira look good in high elo, which, trust me, is not easy to do. Now, moving on, something else that people don't really think about with rebounds is that it allows you to keep the wave in the exact spot of the lane that you want it to be in. To show you how relevant this is, we're going to take a look at two very similar replays. One, where I crush an opponent who doesn't understand this concept, and another, where I'm in a similar matchup where I use this to come out ahead. Starting off with the Yone replay, it starts off as any melee versus ranged matchup would. Zilean has a ton of early control over the lane, so he has the push lead. This means that eventually he's going to crash a wave to my tower and a rebound begins. The mistake he's going to make is that he's going to keep harassing me, but he's also hitting the wave at the same time as it's rebounding into him. Now don't think too much about this. Here's the only thing you need to focus on. Notice how much room I have to work with in lane, and how Zilean is starting to have a really bad time compared to before. I've even denied him a cannon minion with this previous trade. And when I'm going in on him, he can't fight back all that much. Every time I'm running at him, he has to respect the fact that my jungler could be here ganking, since he's so far up the lane. And eventually, being this overextended all the time, he does get ganked and dies. This looked horrible and completely unplayable for him, right? And it's because he used a strategy that made no sense for this specific game. Let me show you an example of what he could have potentially done. In this Ahri game, we have the exact same scenario. I kind of crash 2 waves at Qiyana's tower, and a rebound begins. Now at this point, notice the difference between how the previous Zilean played and what I'm going to do. I could walk up here and threaten harass with Qs and autos, but that would probably damage the wave at the same time, and I don't want that. Instead, I'm going to chill for a bit and let the rebound come all the way up to here in the lane, unlike the Zilean who kept pushing very aggressively. This simple move completely changes everything. Qiyana will have a hard time trading onto me as a melee champion. There's just not a lot of room and space for her to work with, and if she goes in, she'll be super overextended. And unlike the previous Zilean, I don't have to worry about ganks all that much in this position. On the other hand, Qiyana definitely does. As a result, look how much more easily I'm able to harass and zone her. In no time at all, Qiyana realizes that she's running low on resources and leaves before she's ganked for overextending. And just like that, I deny her an entire wave and win this early laning phase. The point here is that if you have a winning matchup during a rebound, then you should think about where you want the wave to be to punish your opponent. And then you should actually patiently wait for it to get there before you start thinning and harassing them again. I feel like I'm standing in front of a class giving a lecture on how to do 2+2. It's so simple, and yet this level of macro is literally how you climb to Challenger. People just don't want to practice this super basic stuff. And speaking of overly simple strategies, here's another one that works way too often for some reason. So when a wave is rebounding, it kind of goes without saying that one side has an experience lead, because they've killed more minions, right? Which means that during the early levels, you need to be hyper aware of level spikes during rebounds, both for yourself and your opponent. For example, here I'm playing Sylas vs Cassio, which is about as horrible as a matchup as it gets in mid. That's definitely why I'm missing so many of these last hits. The matchup is just clearly unplayable. Anyway, a bit later, Cass crashes a wave, and now our rebound's gonna begin towards her side of the lane. This sets up some of the stuff we've mentioned so far. It's hard for me to walk up, and she's even setting up a Camille roam off this freeze. It's definitely not fun for me. But the one edge I do have is the experience lead I just talked about. I'm nearly level 6, and I want to play around that spike. On the flip side, if you're the one at a wave deficit doing what this Cassiopeia is doing, then this is definitely a hotspot moment to be like, whoa, 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 whoa. Based on my own experience, how close is my opponent to level 6? Maybe I should play carefully here. That's definitely what Cassio should be thinking here. Of course she's not going to do that, otherwise she wouldn't be in the video, so I bait her into thinking she has lane control, and I go in with my level spike. And if I hadn't shot my E to the middle of Gondor, then this would have been a clean kill even in a hard losing matchup. I can't emphasize what a simple and OP trick this is. You should always play around level spikes on rebounds, and if you're on the other side, then be much more careful, especially around the level 5 to 6 area. It is insane how often I get kills this way because people just don't think about this, even in high elo. Okay, cool. So that's some ways you can use rebounds to get lane pressure. Like I said, it's just some examples, and I'll cover even more in the course. But for now, let's look at some examples of me using rebounds to roam around the map. To show you how OP roaming off bounce backs are, let's take a look at this Nami game. We've double killed the enemy bot lane because every game is support diff when I'm on the Rift. That was definitely all me. Lucian wants to crash the wave into the tower, but this is going to cause a small issue. As you can see, the incoming wave is near the tower, so this wave isn't actually going to crash, meaning no rebound and no roaming for me. What I'm about to do is super niche, and you don't have to learn it or think about it too much if you don't want to. As a support, I really wanted this rebound to happen, so I make sure to walk into the enemy tower to drag the incoming wave. This makes sure that my own minions don't get stuck and frozen outside of the tower, so our wave crashes, meaning that a rebound is now going to begin for us. Okay, great. Now the wave is rebounding towards us and I can roam. Now the simple concept to remember when roaming off a rebound is to think about how much time you actually have to leave lane. So the typical rule for how much time you have is all the way from when you crash the wave at their tower to when they crash the wave at your tower and you have to go pick up those minions, right? But the reason I was so desperate to make that earlier play is because supports have it even better. Since you don't have to farm anything, if your ADC isn't under threat of being dove, you can just dilly-dally around the map even more, which is a pretty nice and balanced role, right? So now I just go and do whatever. It's not like I'd planned any of what's about to happen. Mid lane is looking a bit sketchy, my teammates seem like they're about to int, so I just go over there to make sure that nothing happens to them. I get here, miss my bubble on Hecarim, and walk away knowing that my work here is done. And although I didn't really get anything in mid, it's not like I lost anything for it, and that's the point. You can see that as I get back to bot that my Lucian was totally fine on his own for the time being. And just to clarify, this roam would have been good if I had been Lucian as well. I would have gotten back to lane to catch this wave, having missed very little of it. That's the whole point of roaming off rebounds. But in this specific case, I made a new friend by roaming to mid lane. My Zac was pretty grateful, so he came to gank my lane, and since the rebound I created put Sivir and Sona in a horrible lane position, it turns out it was pretty easy kills. I know that was a lot of very specific situations that are never going to happen in your games. And it's not like I knew what was going to happen when I set up this rebound from dying to the tower. But the main takeaway here is that I set up a situation where I have everything to gain and basically nothing to lose. The results you see in your games are gonna vary from game to game, but it should almost always be positive as long as you're playing off the rebound correctly and roaming at the right time. Now, another key thing you should look out for in the early game is the level of your opponent's wave clear. During that period where your opponent has to clear the wave at their tower and then push the rebound into your tower, it goes without saying that the less wave clear that they have, the longer that whole process is going to take, right? So it's even more effective to roam off rebounds versus low wave clear champions. Taking a look at this LeBlanc game, I'll show you just how OP roaming is versus low wave clear champions. Here I crash a big wave at Akali's tower, which is obviously going to create a rebound as we've constantly talked about. And now I begin to roam. As I do, look, I go from full vision from mid to the jungle. Not only that, but Shaco literally spots me on my way through the jungle. You may think, wow, that's the most obvious roam of all time. Why, yes it is, but does vision really matter a lot of the time if your opponents can't do anything about it? It's not like Akali can follow or punish me for this. She doesn't have to wave clear to crash the wave at my tower, and she's stuck there, clearing that wave and fixing her rebound. Also, Shaco doesn't want to just sit here and kinda guard me from roaming to bottom. Not only that, but Kalista and Seraphine's wave is in a bad spot when I look down there. If they back off, they're gonna miss the cannon and maybe some more minions. And I'm counting on the fact that they'll tunnel vision on this, and well, they do. I come down here and get the most ridiculous kill of all time. Afterwards, a bunch of shenanigans happen, but like before, it's not about what's going on in this specific game, but the stuff leading up to it. I got stuck down here for a long time, but looking back at mid, Akali still hasn't crashed the wave. I technically still have time to get back here to catch my wave if needed. In fact, let's take a look at how long that process took her. I crashed the wave at 2 minutes and 45 seconds, and Akali didn't manage to crash her rebound at my tower all the way until 3 minutes and 45 seconds. I had an entire minute where I could have done whatever I wanted on the map. I could have gone to the bathroom or watched a minute of Love Island UK on my second monitor. It really wouldn't have mattered what I did in that minute. What matters is that she could do nothing about it, and I barely missed anything by not being in lane. And so I just want to make a final point here that the opposite is also true. Roaming versus champions with high wave clear is going to be significantly worse. For example, this Aphelios in this game crashes the wave into me at about 325, similar to the previous example. But because I'm Yasuo, a champion with great wave clear early on, I actually crashed the rebounding wave by 353. That was a 28-second process, basically half of the time it took Akali, which means that Aphelios' roam into the river was much worse here. So I urge you to think about how good your opponent's wave clear is before you roam on rebounds, and how much time you actually have before you're forced back to lane to catch the wave. As a quick note, the best champions to roam early versus in every lane are things like these. All of them have pretty bad early wave clearing, and you'd be able to take really long roams versus any of them. Now I really want to get into more examples because I haven't even gotten into what I really want to talk about, but I'm starting to look at how long my script is right now. I'm also recalling how often me and my boss have bantered about how much I like to yippity yap during the videos I make. It's probably best I call things here. If you want to hear me ramble on about rebounds and waves some more, then check out the course. There's about an hour more worth of content there if you really enjoyed this. Otherwise, I hope you guys enjoyed. Hopefully you see that it doesn't matter what elo goals you have. Good wave knowledge is by far the best way for climbing ranks, and you should definitely be working on your rebound game. And of course, the best way to master this concept is to check out my course over at Skillcapped. We have so much more to show you there for how to climb fast that we spent a ton of time working on, and it truly does work. So, see you there.